Hello everyone, this is Ranger J 1999 from the Reality Cube Gamers, and welcome to our first lore video. And you're probably wondering, Ranger, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing lore videos? Well, I'll tell you. You know, we've been streaming for a long time, and mainly covering Star Wars games, our primary game being Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes and Battlefront, among others. And every time a new character comes into the game, we get a ton of questions from players that may not know a lot about them, especially for the expanded universe characters. And me, being the lore junkie that I am, have decided to give in and to start doing lore videos so that we can basically cut off the middleman. And every time a character comes out, I'm going to try to do a lore video like this, so you guys have all the information you need on it, and you can always reference that when you're looking at the character, things of that nature. Now, for these videos, the style that I'm kind of going to go in is more of a podcast feel. We're just going to talk about some of the big things about the character as we go through it. I'm not going to try to hit every single little detail. It's more of just the big things, kind of skim through, give you some thoughts on things. It's not really, I'm not here to argue or debate anything that's out there. I'm just going to give you the facts as they are and just give you the interesting tidbits that you might be interested in. Also, if any images that I use or images we use, if you are the creator and have an issue with us using any of those that we may put on this, then just contact us, let us know, and we'll take steps to correct it. Not a problem with that. Now, this video is for mainly our Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes community, but we just Star Wars fans in general. And of course, if I make any mistakes, I'm sure you guys will let me know, and that's totally cool. I don't mind if you guys leave constructive criticisms, things you like, things you don't like. If I make any mistakes, you can correct it in there in the video. I don't have any problem with that. Just be constructive. Anything that's ridiculous, I'm just going to delete and just move on. I don't have time for it, but everything else is very much welcome. With all that out of the way, let's get to our first character that we will be covering. And if you haven't guessed by the image that I have here, you can see that it is, of course, Darth Malak, or just plain Malak if you prefer. Now, to me, Malak is one of the most interesting characters in the expanded universe, or EU, and of course, he is not canon. He is from the Knights of the Old Republic era, or the Old Republic era. And he was first introduced in the Knights of the Old Republic game back, I think, in 2004. 2004, I think, is when Knights of the Old Republic came out. I might be wrong on the date, 2003, 2004. And he was the main antagonist for the game. So really, for what I'm giving here, just what I remember about the character, his thoughts, kind of a general storyline. I'm sure I'm going to miss some other things that maybe you know about him. This is just for that new person that's never heard the character to kind of sink their teeth in, and they can delve more. It gives them a thirst for knowledge to learn more about this character. So let's learn some more things about more things. Let's just learn some things about Darth Malak. Now, the first thing that I found interesting, and I did not know this, and I followed this character for a long time, is I could not find a date of birth, even though it's a fictitious fantasy character in the Star Wars universe. I could not find a date of birth. So I guess apparently the midichlorians just poofed him in existence and no one recorded it. So that was kind of interesting to see that I could not find a date of birth for any of the source materials. So let's kind of describe Darth Malak as he looks. Now, Darth Malak was a light-skinned human male who stood roughly 2 meters in height, a little bit over 6 feet for us U.S. folks. Now, one of the interesting things that Darth Malak was known for was that his head, typically you saw him with a shaved head, and he was adorned with blue tattoos, which later became black. And I did see some source material that I remember looking at once upon a time. I can't remember, but it's been a long time, as I said. This guy's been in my life for quite a long years. Images of him with hair when he was very young. Now, the other thing that he's known for, but I mean, mainly he's known for being bald. And most of the iconography, the look of him is based off that. You know, even as a Jedi, most pictures that I could find of him is just with him with the bald head. The only distinct thing that's before he had his tattoos put on and after. So you can kind of go look for images on there and kind of see the progression of the look of Malak. Now, the other distinct thing that you see when he becomes a Sith is, of course, his outfit, which was the red-orange body armor that he wore. It was something that really was skin tight, showed off his physique. He was very much well built. and that was because he was a ridiculously good combatant warrior, and we'll get into that later on with some of the fun facts about him. The other thing that he's known for, besides the look of that, is he had, in a duel with Darth Revan, kind of being a little cheeky with Revan, thinking he was being too soft. Revan would cut off his entire lower jaw, and this one basically prevented Malak from being able to talk, obviously. But he had to use a kind of a prosthetic, a kind of a vocabulator, I think is what it was called, that kind of gave him a very electronic tone, that had a very disconcerting, kind of very gruff, robotic sound. It was really hard for him to talk without that. I mean, well, obviously, but I mean, even then, it was really hard for him to come up with words, and it just was very off-putting to hear. Now, he was very good at languages. He knew quite a lot of languages. Some of the languages he knew was the Sith. He knew Basic, down the line. But even with that injury, he was, as much as he knew, it was hard for him to talk, basically. Now, he had two distinct looks. The other look that he had as a Jedi Knight, of course, Malak wore the distinctive Jedi Knight robes from the era, and you can go and look at the Jedi Knight robes from the Old Republic era. It was a little bit different than the Jedi that we're seeing in the movies later on, but very much resembled those, and there was subtle things. The other cool thing I learned is about his lightsabers. Now, as a Jedi, he carried a blue lightsaber and had that he used with the blue crystal. I did not know that. And the other thing that was really interesting is that of course, he adopted the red-hued lightsaber that all Sith carried, self-built by him, and the blade that it produced was much longer than the standard blade of most lightsabers, and I think it kind of fit his fighting style. He also, fun fact, had a Sith sword that he had gotten from Korban, and it said he never really used it in combat, which I kind of understand, being a lightsaber duelist, but he could have used it if he wanted to. And Sith swords are really cool because Sith swords from the really ancient Sith had created weapons that were infused with Sith alchemy that could block and parry a lightsaber, and the Sith preferred these swords to lightsabers because they just like when they cut something to see the blood splatter. Pretty gory, but that's just the way the Sith were. Now, originally, Malak was not his name. His name was originally Alek, A-L-E-K. And he was born on the planet Quelli, and I might be saying that wrong, or Quelli, in a village named, are you ready for this? Squingwar Gesimus. And I'm not making that up. That is actually the name of the village he was named after. Squingwar Gesimus. Gotta love it. And I probably may be pronouncing that wrong, but that's pretty much looking how I'm looking at it, how the pronunciation sounds. Now, after that, what had happened when he was a young kid, as a young child, his village and his planet was pretty much attacked by the Mandalorians in their first acts of aggression, and he fled his homeworld to the Galactic Republic. And when he got there, they decided, and I don't know why the immigration officials did this, but I guess they just wanted to laugh. They decided to make his last name Squingwar Gesimus. So it was Alex Squingwar Gesimus, and I'll tie this in all here in a second. And when he got to the Galactic Republic, he was found, of course, that he was Force sensitive, and any Force sensitive children are soon to be picked up by the Jedi. They were picked up by the Jedi. And he was taken to the Jedi, basically became a Padawan and went to the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. Now, his last name caused a lot of problems for his his peers and his friends, and so instead of referring to him anytime as Squinquark Gesimus, they started calling him Squint, and he liked that. And so a lot of his close friends and allies, people that were near to him, would call him Squint. And this is also when he became a Padawan that he also met and befriended Revan. And of course, you know that Revan and Malak were interlinked for the rest of their lives. From this moment forward, the two were basically, you can kind of say their destinies were locked together. Now, Revan, of course, was always considered the stronger of the two. There's no debate about that. But Alex mirrored him in the sense that they both just desired knowledge, just to the umpteenth level. They just weren't just satisfied with you teaching them something. They were always about questioning it. Why is that this way? What do you mean by that? So they just had this thirst and hunger for more and more knowledge. Now, for a time after being on Dantooine, they basically sought additional training, and they ended up learning from the Twi'lek Jedi Master Zar Lestin for a time on the galactic capital, of course, of Coruscant. And I don't have a specific date, but sometime before the year 3964, and this is an important date to remember, and I'm not going to chronologically go through every date, but I will hit on a few dates that are very important. 3964 BBY. At this time, they were both very well-known, respected, and Jedi, and had achieved the rank of Jedi Knight. We do know that. Now, in 3964, this date in BBY, or Battle Before Yavin in the Star Wars timeline, we know that this is a significant date in the Old Republic era, because this is when the Mandalorian Wars kicked off. This is when the Mandalorians launched an assault on the Republic, and this is where the war first started. Now, you remember Alex's homeworld had been devastated by the Mandalorians. Revan, just being who he was, they were both idealists. They were ready to jump in. However, this led them into conflict with the Jedi Council, because the Jedi Council did not want the Jedi to get involved with the war. They wanted to be more patient. They wanted to see how things played out. You know, they were very pacifist, and this came in stark contrast to Revan and Malak. These two weren't having it. And it got to the point that they forbade any Jedi from joining against the war against the Mandalorians. But both Revan and Alec had this sense of justice, that they believed that the Jedi were more than just to learn about the Force, that they had a duty and a responsibility to defend and protect the innocent, and they were citizens of the Republic. The Mandalorians were ruthless. They were no holds barred. They were genocidal. The atrocities committed by the Mandalorians are very numerous, and you can read about the Mandalorian Wars if you really want to, on some of the stuff that they did. And they weren't having it. So Revan and Alec both broke off. Revan formed, of course, if you've read your Revan lore, he started the Revan Chiss or Revan Chice, and Alec was his first follower, and they soon started to recruit a bunch of Jedi that agreed with their kind of philosophy that the Jedi shouldn't be pacifists. They needed to be more active, and that they had a responsibility and a duty to protect the Republic. And with that, they got to the war. They started off joining the war by first investigating it. They looked at the Mandalorian threat and kind of looked at the Republic border with them, and they started just kind of feeling their way out. Now, once they got into the war, this is where the turning point of the war happens. These guys were both incredibly capable warriors. Now, Revan was known more as the thinker. He was more of the tactical genius. Alec was known more as just the warrior. Great frontline commander that could lead the troops from the front, make quick decisions. Revan was long-term strategy. So different styles, but they were both effective. And when you combine the two and putting them together, once they got involved with the war, they were able to stop the halt of the Mandalorians. They were able to stop their advance to the Republic territory. At this point, the Mandalorians had taken over quite a large swath of the Republic. And so at this point, the citizens of the Republic, public opinion polls, people just viewed them as heroes. Here are these Jedi, leading Jedi, in the defense of the Republic, and it got to their victories started mounting up, that it even led to the Senate and Supreme Chancellor of the time, and I believe their name was Tol Cressa. I don't know a lot about them. Maybe I'll have to learn that, look some up about them, but basically giving direct control of the entire Republic fleet and forces to Revan. So Revan and Malak were able to now, with the full backing of the fleet, of the Republic, everything, they had basically garnered all the military might that they needed. And to now that they had stopped the Mandalorians, they were able to start pushing them back. As I said, Malak was a warrior. I mean, he was all about he just charged recklessly into battle. He didn't care the danger. He was all about he just in the trenches, in the mud. He would get in there, and so you have to respect that about Alec as a Jedi. Now, the thing about this is that as the war continued, concerns started being raised over what Revan and Malak started doing tactically. Now, originally they got in the war to defend and the citizenry in the Republic from this threat that was the Mandalorians. However, and veterans, and I'm myself a veteran, know that if you get into war battles, it will change you. And what started happening, because of how brutal the Mandalorians were, Malak and Revan started to become not only as brutal, but more brutal with the things that they did. They believed that victory at all costs was all that mattered, and that the ends justified the means. And this kind of started them down their path of the dark side. And they were ruthless. I mean, the Mandalorians understood just how ruthless these two could be. And they just basically became dispassionate. Their dispositions changed. And it stopped being more about defending and more about destroying the Mandalorians. And that's where their fall from grace started happening. Unfortunately for them, now the Republic loved them. They thought hey, you're winning. That's all that we care. Go forward and kick their ass. That's fine with us. However, the Jedi really, really had a problem with this. Obviously, the Jedi Code, the Jedi Council, all the Jedi Masters looked at this, and this gave them great pause because, of course, this is not the Jedi way. And it gave them into conflict with Malak and Revan, who both disagreed with the Jedi already, but now this started really hampering the tension between the two. And this would lead to things further down the line where Malak and Revan they hated the Jedi Council. They hated their philosophy, their way of viewing the Force, the way they handle things. They thought they were just too self-absorbed and not concerned with actual things outside of the Force, and that was their problem. And of course, the Jedi Council, the atrocities and things that Revan and Malak were doing, although yes, it was helping the Republic, felt that their actions would lead to more consequences down the line. So this led to kind of the animosity toward Malak and Revan and their followers in the Jedi Council. Now, I'm not going to go through all the battles of the Mandalorian Wars. If you want to read more about that, you can. That's on you. But there was many battles. They basically kind of culminated with the Battle of Malachor 5. Now, before that, I'm sorry, I skipped over something. So, during this time, Malak and Revan had found the first piece of the map that would lead them to the Star Forge, and this was the Star Forge was basically something the Rakata Empire had built. It's kind of like a weapon, and what it was, the Star Forge could basically keep generating it could be used to create all kinds of ships and robots and vehicles just endlessly, and was fueled by the dark side, and it could construct starships like extremely fast. They were able to basically get the first piece of the map on Dantooine, and this would be a part of their journey as well. Before the final battle of the Mandalorian War, they had found another piece of the star map on Kashyyyk, which we know is the Wookiee home planet. And when they got to Malachor 5, They found a whole bunch of stuff. They found the Trace Academy. They started to delve into Sith secrets there. Um, this is where they started learning about Sith teaching, and this is where their fall to the dark side began. Really, really began. At this point, you could say they were already fallen to the dark side. They fell to the dark side at this point. But as far as the Republic was concerned, and everybody was like, okay, they're out fighting the war and stuff, but they didn't know anything like this was happening. But their fall from the heroes, in the sense that they were still viewed as heroes by the Republic, but they had basically started to turn. And they had turned at this point to the dark side. Now, during the Battle of Malachor 5, you can read about it. Basically, Revan uses his tactics like he always does, and he gets the Mandalorians there through his brilliant tactician, and a battle ensues. It's pretty epic. You can go and read about it. In the end, Revan faced off against the Mandalorian's leader, which was... I'm trying to think... I just went blank on who this was. I think it was Mandalore the Ultimate. There we go. I had to think about that for a second. As I said, I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes and forget things. And that being done, they also learned that the Sith, there was a plot more ingrained with the Mandalorians attacking and the Sith. And being that they'd already started on their journey for the Star Forge and the dark side, learning about the dark side, there's a bunch of stuff after the battle that happens with the Mandalorians and the Republic and things of that nature. But after this, Revan and Malin with their forces decided to go investigate this. Now, of course, to the Republic, they just disappeared. So the Republic thought that their heroes had been killed. No one knew what had happened. And, you know, it was kind of a sad moment for them, because these two Jedi, they didn't know at the time, were turned to the dark side, but they were their heroes. Said no one knew what had happened. So they went to the unknown regions of space looking for... One, they were looking for surviving Mandalorians still, but they were also looking for the Sith. And during this time, purely by coincidence, they came across information about the Dark Lord of the Sith and the Sith Emperor, which we know to be Vitiate, who was the true Emperor of the Sith Empire. And he's got his own backstory that we can get into later. And of course, he was making his capital on the planet of Droman Kos. Revan and Malak took it upon themselves to infiltrate and learn all they could about the Sith Emperor, his Sith Empire, what were their plans. And still learning through the dark side, they decided to infiltrate and investigate. And so they kind of posed as mercenaries looking for work, and they did this for many, many months. You know, learning, I mean, basically anything to get their hands on about this emperor. Now, they also found while they were there through reconnaissance that the emperor was raising an army to invade the Republic. And they thought they could basically get in there and kind of see if they could sneak into his citadel and see if they can get even more information about the Emperor. Didn't know that he basically was a trap. They went in there. They ended up having to confront Vitiate, who was way too powerful. If you know who Vitiate is, they had no chance. And he basically overwhelmed them. They were no match. He basically, at that point, tortured them. He kind of broke them in that style. He made them his subservients. He granted them both the title of Darth, and basically he sent them back as to be his spearhead into his invasion for the Republic. And they were sent to not only with that in mind, but he wanted to, you know, having all the information they had, he wanted them to go to find the rest of the star maps and create the Star Forge and use it again to be the spearhead for the accelerated Sith attack. And that's why they went back. But the Emperor kind of miscalculated here, and Revan and Malak were exceptionally powerful Force users, and they were able to break the bonds that Vitiate set for them. And by doing so, they were able to basically just block all that and forget about it. And they went on to discover the rest of the 3 additional star maps and I don't remember where they all were. I know one was on Tatooine, one was on Korriban. I cannot remember where the last one is, but I'm sure you can find it. So they took it on themselves and took their own initiative. So they went to Rakata. They basically, through some trials and some stuff that you can read about, got access to the Star Forge. Revan took it over, and they started creating their armada. On top of that, they still had located all the former Jedi who now had become Sith. They were still Revanchists that were loyal to him, and he built up his army. Not only he built up his fleets, his followers and soldiers that had fought with him, and Malak joined his cause, and they built up their forces, and then they decided that they were going to basically start their own empire. So in a significant year, 3959, they started a new Sith Empire on Korriban, where they had found one of the last pieces of the star map, and this was one of the ancient Sith homeworld for the Sith, so it made sense for them to do that. They started a Sith Academy there, started getting more recruits for not just Sith, but they also started other things, military structures, and getting everything in place to do what they wanted. It was also at this time that they announced that Revan would become the new Dark Lord of the Sith, and Malak, although he probably would have liked the title, he took his secondary role as the Sith apprentice. And then 2 years later, that's when they started their campaign against the Republic. And this would be known as the Jedi Civil War. Now, before then, this is during this time period that they had their duel. Malak basically thought that Revan was being too soft and kind of questioned him. They got into a lightsaber duel, and Revan, this is where he cuts off his jaw. And so that's where he started having to wear the prosthetic that you see him wearing. Now, from this point on, the beginning stuff, they start the war against the Jedi Civil War. And they were basically going to get rid of the Jedi, reform the Republic, because they knew the Sith were coming. They knew the Jedi were not up to the task as far as they were concerned, and they were going to do that. And they were successful. I mean, they kicked the crap out of the Republic. The Republic was still reeling from after all the Mandalorian Wars. And now here comes Revan and Malak, new Lords of the Sith that had been the heroes of the Republic. Now were basically turning the tide on the Republic, which was in no position to fight another war, and they started stomping their face in. Is just no way to put it. I mean, they just started destroying the Republic. In desperation, at this point, the Jedi Council sent a strike force led by one of their strongest Jedi, and it's a name you probably heard before, Bas Lashan, and she was well known for her battle meditation. That's something you can read about. And so they infiltrated his ship, and so Malak's in one ship, Revan's on his flagship. They're both in their flagships. Bastila confronts him. They start fighting. Malak takes this opportunity to betray his master, as all good Sith would do, and destroy his ship. He thought he had killed Revan at this point, but he hadn't. Bas Lashan saves Revan's life, and someone's trying to text me or something. Thought he had that he had been destroyed, but she saved his life. She took him back to the Jedi Council. They swiped his mind, and this, of course, leads to the game of the Knights of the Old Republic. Now, I'm not going to cover the story of the Knights of the Old Republic. If you haven't played the game, please do. I'm just going to cover how it ends. If you want to know how it ends or some of the big pieces that I'm about to hit, you can stop the video here. But so everything transpires in the game, and you basically lead to the final part. A lot of stuff I'm not going to get into, but basically Malak captures Bastila, he tortures her, he makes her his apprentice, Revan comes after him, Malak takes Bastila with him to the Star Forge, he sets all kinds of troops and stuff against Revan, who fights through it. He then eventually sends Bastila against him, Revan overcomes this, and then they have a final confrontation between Malak and Revan, these longtime friends and now rivals for the dark side of the Force. And I mean, there's much more to it than that, but that's kind of what happens. And you have a final confrontation with Malak, where you kind of see that Malak has been using Jedi that he has been captured to augment his power, and you basically have a fight. You win. Malak's defeated, and then that's the end of Malak, basically. Now, one thing I did read is that when Malak did die, he was not. He had no animosity or anger or anything toward Revan. He actually, he felt kind of like he had regrets, but he died, and he died as a warrior, and he died in the Star Force, and that's kind of how he goes out. Now, there are some other mentions of Malak that are mentioned after this, where you can get snippets of stuff, and he's not really like anywhere else. I mean, his name's mentioned. I think on Joman Concert was a statue built of him as one of the most powerful Sith that had existed. But after that, it really there. Now, he also had a relationship with a woman named Jarrell. I'm really not going to cover that. If you want to go see, I mean, there's more stuff during up to the Mandalorian Wars, smaller things, but I mean, if I cover everything that's gone on that you can read about Malak or know about Malak, we'll be here for another 2 hours. It's cool. He had a relationship with her. I'm not going to spoil anything. If you want to read about it, you can go check it out. Now, the last thing I do want to cover is some of the abilities that Malak had, or Alec. Now, as a Jedi, Alec, he was trained as a Jedi Guardian. Jedi Guardians are more your fighters, your protectors, your warriors, unlike your consulars, who is more your Force users, dignitaries, diplomats, those kind of things. There were two schools at the time of Jedi in that kind of regard. And he was mainly focused mainly on lightsaber combat and physical aspects of the Force. So Malak was considered to be one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of his time. It said in combat he used a one-handed, very aggressive style, and he used, when we get to the physical aspects of the Force, he was able to block pain. He was able to augment his ability for protection and healing. So that was kind of like his main Force abilities. He was just a very good warrior, very skilled with the lightsaber, and he can use some of the stuff so he can take a beating and keep on I can't even talk. Take a beating and keep on ticking. And that's what he was. And you can see that he was in the front lines of battle all the time, and it makes sense that his fighting style and his abilities kind of revolved around that. Now, when he became a Sith, his powers in the dark side were substantial in that he could do some things that I'm sure others have been able to do, but I just found it interesting. One of the things that he could do was he could force choke more than one person at a time. That's pretty impressive in my book. Just that alone is pretty damn cool. He could create whirlwinds of force that he could use on people, his victims, his combat, or anybody facing against him. He could create stasis field to freeze his enemies that he was facing in place. He was able to use the force again, like he did before, as a guardian, to not only just for protection, so he can take a lot of beating, but to augment his speed. He can also use it to suppress the abilities of other people, other Force users. So that's pretty impressive in that regard. He also, for a short time, could make himself invulnerable to Force powers for a short time, but he could use it at ideal points to kind of win the battle. Let's see. Malak, I'm just going by what I remember, what I've been reading. He could amplify his screams. He could trigger shockwaves that ripple through the Force. I'm trying to think of something else. Oh, he also had one other thing. Yes, Malak had the ability to use dark healing, and this was the ability to basically suck the life out of another person, or mainly the Force, and use it to regenerate your own wounds and stuff like that. So he was really good. I mean, he was exceptionally skilled in the use of Sith sorcery. and he can use some other things like Force Lightning. We saw that he did this in the Torture Battle with Lashawn, and also when fighting Darth Revan. So he was one of those rare kind of Sith that he was exceptionally good at lightsaber combat and very physical, but he was also really, really exceptionally good at using, the dark side, those unnatural abilities that, typically, you kind of go into one range or the other, but he could use all that. And there was very few that could stand against him. I mean, honestly, Revan, Basla, maybe a few others that could maybe face him. Revan definitely, but Basla, even ground, and then I don't think there's many Jedi Masters at the time when he was a Sith that could stand against him. But that's a cool thing. You guys can debate that. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just giving you guys the nitty-gritty of this character. And with that, we're going to end it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've enjoyed covering this character. He's one of my favorite characters. I love the Old Republic era, but I just love Star Wars in general. So do me a favor, kind of tell me how you think this went, your thoughts, what I can do better, what what I can improve upon, what you'd like me to sustain. I'm always open to any of that kind of stuff. And we're going to continue this series, so feel free to be aware. And if you have a suggestion of who you'd like me to cover next, you can make them in there. And I will take that into consideration for the next lore video I do. Do me a favor, if you like this, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on this video, and help support our channel. If you want more content like this, then all you need to do is subscribe and wait till you get the next one. That's the best way of putting it. We have all kinds of stuff. We have Patreons. We play lots of games. We do a lot of live streams for Reality Skewed Gamers. So, that being said, that ties all this up for Darth Malak. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope it makes you go out and want to get more information for yourself and learn more about this character. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to our next segment together. Until then, be safe.